The Vera Project. Always all ages.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in for All Ages in conversation with James, Shannon, and Kate. I'm Maya, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Vera. I've been a volunteer member and now on staff. I've been with the organization for about 6 years now, and I'm really excited to jump into these questions and just hear about the history of Vera and everything Vera and the DIY scene from years ago. So I'm just going to get started with introductions. I'm going to pass it over to James.
Hello, Maya. My name is James Keblis. I'm one of the co-founders of the Vera Project, and it's an honor to be here. I am in a brightly lit room that's kind of grayish. It's a bedroom. I'm wearing dark rimmed glasses and a silver shirt, and I also have silver hair. And that is me. Yeah, thank you. And I go by the pronouns he, him.
Awesome. And then we can pass it over to Shannon.
I'm Shannon Stewart, and I am a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair. I'm wearing a black sweatshirt with some sparkles on it and some neon pink earrings. And I use the pronouns she and her.
Awesome. And then we can pass it over to Kate.
Thanks, Maya. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Becker. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Vera Project, and I am a Caucasian woman. I am standing in a darkened room. I have red hair and glasses, and I use the pronoun she, her.
Awesome. And I totally forgot to describe myself. I am wearing a striped shirt. I'm mixed Filipino and Mexican, proud of it. I'm wearing gold hoop earrings today, and I'm not wearing eyelashes, which I usually, if you see me in public or at the gala, I'm usually wearing big false eyelashes, but today we're going natural. And it's very brightly lit today, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, thank you guys so much for those introductions. We're gonna hop right into the questions, just talking about the history of Vera, history of the Seattle music scene, and how it all came together. So yeah, I definitely want to hear from you guys and just listen to all of these amazing stories. So I guess, what was your experience in Seattle in the 90s, and what kind of shows were you first going to or booking? Because I know you guys were booking shows and like doing the DIY thing. Do you want to start off, James, or anybody can be like a popcorn if anybody wants to jump in there first?
I feel like Kate, you were rocking the 90s. This is a Kate answer at the gate for sure.
Okay.
So I had the great honor of starting the old firehouse in 1992. Shortly after I arrived in Seattle, I got busy working with a bunch of young people out in Redmond to start an all ages venue. And it continues on to this day. It has changed a bit over the years, but in the 90s, while shows were still technically illegal in the city of Seattle, lots of people came to Redmond from around the region for shows. So it was a Redmond scene, but it was also larger than a Redmond scene. And because there was a shortage of all ages shows, we were able to land some really fantastic bands to play a 500 capacity room in a converted firehouse in downtown Redmond. So I was the talent buyer, if you will, although buyer was a relative term. We would trade the majority of the door in exchange for the performance. So that was the terms of the deal. And we had a space that originally was a YMCA. So for the first year, the decorations on the wall looked like they were designed for 5-year-olds, because they were designed for 5-year-olds, because during the week, that's who was in the building. After a year of sharing the building, it became solely the old firehouse after that. So it was an all ages venue. and then became more than an all ages venue. We had an art gallery, and we ultimately put in a recording and film production studio called the Media Lab, had a basketball court, an outdoor cafe area. We developed it over time, but really at the center of it was the weekend all ages shows. That's how people found out about what we were doing and connected to the program. So who were we booking? Well, our second show had Seaweed, and Seaweed was huge at the time.
I was at that show.
Oh, it was such a good one. I was
I might have been
over
at
my
that
head.
too.
Really, Shannon? Oh, so
Or I don't know, maybe I'm getting it confused. I went to the Jawbreaker show. That's the one I'm thinking of.
I was at that.
yes.
I got to see Seaweed at one of the Rainfest pre-shows when I first moved to Seattle at the Vera Project. So it was kind of an honor because I know that they're from the 90s and like it was like them coming back. So that was super cool. It's kind of like full circle. Now they're playing at Vera. That was like
Love
I think
it so much.
2015 or 2016. But yeah, that was amazing.
So those guys gave me some really good advice early on about not making, I don't know if they want this to be public, but it can be now, I guess, because that was the 90s and we are in 2021. But Clint told me be very careful about making guarantees to bands because you won't be able to make this work if you're making guarantees. You can give them the door, but don't commit beyond that because the all ages scene is so fragile that you don't want to be getting in over your head with commitments financially. And it was really wise advice that served me very, very well for years. And we built that scene on kindness because it wasn't very cool. It was an old fire station that had been a YMCA. And we didn't have a lot of resource. It was just a lot of young people who wanted to make shows happen. So that is what we did, but we were able to land bands because they had such a good time, right? Like a room full of screaming, excited 500 young people was a whole lot better than the Seattle cool of standing to watch the band in the back of the room, right? So, and we just tried to be as good as we could to folks so that they'd want to come back. And it seemed to work. And it was really a scene built by the young people who were involved, by the bands that were involved. We had something called Band Pool, and we'd meet all the time to figure out what shows we were going to book and all of that. And it was that enthusiasm, that commitment, that volunteerism that people put forward in the beginning to helping get it off the ground that really gave it the foundation that it grew from there. And some of those folks went on to be in very notable bands, like Jeremiah Green from Modest Mouse was in the first year of the Band Pool, helping get those shows started. Andrea Zolo from Pretty Girls Make Graves. Dan Gallucci, who was in Murder City Devils, Modest Mouse, and some other bands, all of them were part of helping start that initial scene. So in some ways, I was just in the right place in the right time, willing to make something happen with a bunch of motivated young musicians. So
you're being modest because while there might have been the raw talent around, it was the space that made the talent form into something. You know, I think that you were a big part of that. I mean, you were a scene over there. It was amazing. And I don't know if the stories that you just said would be true if that Redmond Firehouse wasn't there. I don't think those people would have gone on to have the kind of careers that they did or do.
Well, I feel very, very fortunate to have been at the center of that and to have had so many good people around me to help with that. And the question is around what kind of bands, what kind of music was happening. It was very much a hardcore punk and later became sort of a pop punk and hip hop scene. But I'm pretty sure I held the record for a long time of having seen the most amount of 15 and 16-year-old hardcore bands of anyone in all of the Seattle area. Just because I was at every show, right? So, yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Did either one of you guys want to add anything to that about the show booking or any of the bands you were seeing in the 90s in Seattle?
I'll add that my probably most defining music experience in the 90s was when a woman in Seattle named Meg Wachin started a thing called the Velvet Elvis, which was really trying to be the old firehouse in Redmond, but trying to be that in Seattle. It was an all ages club down in Pioneer Square. And I went to a show there, and it was this small black box theater. It was so great because it was actually like a theater, where they put on shows. And when Meg talked to the owners, Jeff, and I'm forgetting Jeff's wife's name, but when they weren't doing the shows, could she do punk shows and hardcore shows there? And they said yes. And so she would do these shows in the Velvet Elvis. There would be this backdrop of like a mountain scene from the theater performance for the weekend or something like that. And it was just so surreal. I went and saw one of these shows there, and I was like, oh man, I got to figure out, I want to be a part of this. I just felt the energy. I felt it was a community. And I was working in a warehouse at the time, just off of downtown. And there was a really cool punk looking female that worked at a nearby warehouse. And she was out smoking. I talked to her, and I was like, yeah, I just saw this great show at the Velvet Elvis, and I got to figure out how I get involved with that thing. And she looked at me like, are you messing with me right now? And that was Meg, who I was talking to. I had no idea that was the person. We were kind of just friends from the warehouse and stuff like that. She was the one that really got the music part of the Velvet Elvis going. And she just kind of laughed and brought me in as like this, green kid, and just wanted to be a part of it, and let me be part of the whole scene. And I just got to be, oh, it was so great. I mean, it was really Seattle's response. It was full of activism. It was, during the TDO, which we'll talk about more later, but it just felt like, oh man, this is just, the music felt like it wasn't just music, it wasn't just for commercial, it was for expression. It was about being friends and about creating an identity and collaboration and building sounds. And it was really rooted in the hardcore scene. And a lot of Olympia had this incredible scene of its own, but and Olympia really wasn't fond of the Seattle scene all that much. So there was only certain places that Olympia musicians would play. The Redmond Firehouse is one of them, but also in Seattle specifically, the Velvet Elvis was one of those too. And so we would get a lot of that great activist music that was coming out of Olympia in Pioneer Square, and working the soundboard and taking equipment in and out and just being part of that whole thing. That for me is when I truly felt music in a different way, where it was a part of like something I wanted to identify as, where there were people and there was a voice, and it felt like, wow, this means something more than just the music. And that was really my defining time in the 90s with music. It was the Velvet Elvis and Meg Wachin, and still grateful to her this day for bringing me in.
For sure. Awesome.
And the Velvet Elvis, oh, sorry, Maya.
Go ahead.
It went on from 1993 till 1999. So there were 6 years of the Velvet Elvis in Pioneer Square.
I'm going to have to Google this after this call. Hopefully I can find something.
It is kind of the weird thing about all of this stuff happening right as the internet was being invented, is like, it's like almost not old enough that there's a lot of historical archive stuff that's been moved, but then it's too young. I don't know. But it's too old to be really present on the internet. So when I look up this stuff, I find this huge gap in information. And I know that Kate has the archive that one day we're all going to move onto the internet somehow. We just have to get it out of her closets and out of her head and into the internet so everyone can know. But I'll just say really quick that I think I was still coming of age. I was still underage during the 90s, most of them. And I was going to shows in Eastern Washington. I'll just shout out the Hoedown, which is where all the Seattle and Olympia bands came through, and the Fairgrounds, which is where I went and saw Fugazi, one of my first shows. And then I was driving to go to the Firehouse and to go to the Velvet Elvis and to shows at the Capitol Theater in Olympia. I think I was definitely kind of more, I love the Firehouse, but I also felt like it was a little too much bro stuff happening. And so I think I felt more at home and like the queer feminist scene that was coming out of Olympia. That was also very much a part of the Firehouse. But maybe I just I found my way through it, through that way.
And I know earlier James mentioned the TDO, the Teen Dance Ordinance. It's something that I'm not very familiar with. I've kind of done a little bit of researching about it, but it's just, obviously it sounded like it was a really tough time. But I'd love to hear from you guys about it. If you could give a kind of like a brief rundown of what it was, and then how did it impact, booking shows and just being a part of the scene back then.
So the Teen Dance Ordinance went into effect in 1985 because there was a club called the Monastery downtown where some sordid and dark things were reportedly happening. And they may or may not have been. The Monastery was before my time in Seattle, but I've certainly heard stories from friends. In any case, even if dangerous things were happening, that should be the responsibility of the promoter and the person running the place, not the young people of Seattle. And City Council passed a law banning young people from coming together in a mixed age environment for the purposes of listening to music and dancing. It was outrageous. We had our own Footloose law here. So those shows that you heard James and I describing, and Shannon describing, about the Velvet Elvis, those were illegal shows. We did them nonetheless, but they were illegal shows. We tried hard through the 90s, lots of activism on the stages of the old firehouse about the Teen Dance Ordinance, and really got organized about 1998 with something called the Teen Dance Ordinance Resistance. But there had been efforts before that. There was an effort that Sir Mix-a-Lot was involved in. There was an effort that a guy named Arlie Karstens was involved in, called the Seattle Youth Brigade, that tried to overturn the Teen Dance Ordinance before that. No one wanted to talk to us. The council members had no interest in hearing from young activists about music and the importance of repealing the Teen Dance Ordinance. So we had to make our presence more well-known. And we staged all sorts of activist events, including occupying city council chambers, so that every time a council member went to or from their office, they had to walk through a group of young people who wanted to talk to them about the importance of repealing the Teen Dance Ordinance. Wouldn't take our meetings. Finally, a council member named Richard Conlin stepped up to the plate to help champion this. Meanwhile, there was lots of other activism happening. Chris Zelik, go ahead. James,
I was going to say the other context that I felt about this, and in retrospect as well, is that, like Kate was saying, we were doing the shows anyway. They were illegal, but we were doing them. And we didn't get, I mean, sometimes we get shut down, or if we were doing something too loudly, they could use this as a tool to shut down things. But there was something bigger going on than the show being shut down. It was a freaking culture war. Like, this was a culture war in Seattle. And the TDO, whether it was being enforced or not, just was a symbol of the different kind of culture that we all thought about for our community, or that many of us thought about for the community. And I think, in Seattle in the 80s and 90s was starting to really come to be a more bigger city, a more visible city. And all these leaders would use the term like world class and stuff like that, and really wanted to like clean Seattle up, like really make it seem like other cities, big cities are, and really culturally wanted to shed the kind of messiness of the and the dangerousness of the music scene and the music culture, worried about drugs, worried about their kids becoming brainwashed. I mean, it was like, that's the culture war that was going on. And meanwhile, there's a whole bunch of young people going, what are you talking about? We want to hang out with our friends. We want to be, we have something we want to say, and this is our place to say it. And why are you, like, what are you afraid of? And I think that's what I feel from all of that time. And then, whenever there's, it became a fight. There was resistance, like Kate was talking about, the brigade and the city hall sit-in and all of that kind of stuff. It became a galvanizing point to like build a fight, and to like put stuff together. And a lot of people came to the fight because we're like, give me a break. What are you people? So it was just this really messed up thinking that civic leaders, business community, political leaders, all parents, we're just like fighting this identity of Seattle emerging into a bigger place for more kinds of people, not just them,
Yeah.
I think also that the law was, if you were nonprofit, it was okay to have shows. So technically, I think the Velvet Elvis was okay because it was umbrellaed by the theater.
That's a good point, Shannon. Yep.
And I think like anyone who was doing shows in partnership with a nonprofit was okay, but that was just like another weird kind of loophole because the monastery had been technically a nonprofit, but I think you can think of it in the general sort of sociological sense that like if it was only nonprofits that could do it, then there's sort of these trusted institutions, which you could also read as like white and potentially Christian or whatever it is, you know, that like these things, these institutions could do youth activities, but nobody else can. And so I think that was also what was going on, is like controlling population. And then just as a curiosity, as like my dance scholar self is like, I wonder if all of the cool people in Seattle that were like this for so many years is because they literally couldn't move and dance and enjoy shows, you know, like they were actually, their bodies were changed by, and their like social patterns were changed by the law, which I think is accurate. But also I think there's just like a cool city thing that's happening.
For sure.
There are great videos though. There's one that's like a Como news reel or something that shows like basically a riot. You know, there's cops coming in trying to shut down a club under the TDO, and all of the kids pushing back, and you know they're fighting the cops and stuff like that. So they you know, it was just
wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. So knowing that like Vera was birthed like in response to the TDO like coming to an end, and also just trying to, you know, have a place for the youth to come for shows. How did you guys all come together? How did Vera, I guess, happen, and where did the idea come from?
Well, I mean, I'm so glad that you started this with the idea that Vera came from the TDO, because it did. I mean, I don't know if the Vera Project would be here today if it wasn't for the TDO. I mean, many groups galvanized and came together because of the TDO, and that includes the Vera Project. And it was something. We were saying, like, we're doing this resistance, and then Vera became an opportunity to do something positive. Like Vera became an opportunity, like, to not just say stop or whatever to fight. It was like, no, we can actually make our own thing. But so that's kind of, it was the idea of that, at least from my memory on it. And the reason that I got into it was because as a part of the Velvet Elvis and being part of the scene and feeling a sense of community and being a part of what the resistance was happening against the TDO, I was loving it and really forming my identity to it. And then I felt like I was part of the music community and everything, but I felt like I couldn't make my rent. Like I had no money. Like I was broke, and I was like, I can sustain this. Like I'm starting, you know, I got to get a job. Like I got to
relatable.
This is not going to work. And so I dropped out of college many times, and I was like, I'm going back to college. I got to get a real job. I'm going to do this right. And I got to grow up or something like that. And I went into an urban planning program at the University of Washington. And I remember studying like, transportation issues or like structural housing stuff I was like, man, I don't care about a lot of this stuff. Like and I just would draw upon what urban planning and community planning was for me. And that was, I would just always, my mind would go to the shows. I mean, I would just think about like, you could have music is such a great thing to bring lots of different kinds of people together. You know, people who come from different walks of life, have different points of view, can agree on a song, you know, can agree on a band or something, you know, and that's a common ground. And I thought that's what community is. I mean, building a city or building urban centers or whatever you want to call it is about people, not structures and things like that. And so what if we thought of music as an urban planning tool? And so I went back to college to get a real life, you know, to grow up and get out of music. And then that's actually what brought me into music. And then all of this was happening at the same time that the TDO argument was really starting to heat up, and we're getting momentum. We sued the city, like Jam Pack formed. Kate was talking about that. And Chris Novoselic from Nirvana used his fame and fortune to really bring more power to this. Beat the city a few times, and we're just kind of feeling momentum to get going. And we're like, holy shit, we're getting bad politicians out. We're winning lawsuits. Like let's do let's make some stuff, let's make things happen. And that's when I met Shannon and had the opportunity to go to Groningen. And Shannon, I'll let you take it from there and talk about some stuff.
Okay. So yeah, James and I decided to do a semester abroad in the Netherlands, and we were in the same urban planning program, which is called Community and Environmental Planning. So it's an urban planning program where it's like a people-centered or environment-centered urban planning program. So there was always a sense of like we were looking at sort of, I guess, community-centered approaches to urban problems. And I wasn't studying music-related things when I was in Groningen. James found Vera because the story that we haven't told yet, and I don't know if we're going to have time, so I'll just paraphrase it for now, sorry, is that before we left to go to Holland, it's my first time leaving the country, and probably like actually going anywhere but Tennessee and Washington, which is weird, but we went to a show that Kate put on at a club called DV8, which was the 18 and up dance club. And Kate, but I think that show was able to be all ages though, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kate promoted Fugazi, and this band called The X opened for them. And The X was from Amsterdam. And so James walked up to the people from The X and was like, we're going there. What should we do? And they were like, if you're going to Groningen, you have to go to Vera. And Vera is like the music underground of Northern Europe or whatever. And so James did that pretty much as soon as we got there. And I went along because we were just together pretty much for 100 days straight. And got involved right away, like met Peter, who is the director and the music booker. And we became really good friends with one of the key members there, Ricky Hendrickson. And we just like our social lives were Vera related while we were in Groningen. And James was volunteering there at the bar and at the door, the coat check, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it was so great.
All of the same things. Like there's a coat check volunteer. Like all of those were just Vera Groningen things. And we just like brought them back from there. And I remember we were sitting on a terrace on a Sunday afternoon after like, I think one of the nights where we were also like learning to live the European life, which is like you go out at midnight or something and you come home at 7. And I had just turned 21. So I think I was like, whoa, this is insane. And James was like, you know what Seattle needs? Seattle needs Vera. And I was like, yeah, that would make it way more fun, like, and it was really like, I think there was a napkin. Am I making this up?
No, there was, I know exactly what we're talking about. Our little umbrella table thing. We had a napkin out. Yeah.
So it was really like one of those kind of funny stories that seems made up, but it wasn't made up. Yeah.
I convinced the University of Washington to pay for me to go to Groningen to study a punk club. Like I couldn't believe when I went back and the show that Shannon was talking about, we kind of explained, Kate would explain like why we're at DV8 and what crazy laws and stuff are happening in Seattle. And Shannon and I are trying to address this, and then the X was kind of giving us guidance and talking about Vera and Groningen and all that kind of stuff. And I just inspired. I mean, I was like, oh my, okay, the vision, like that's what I've been looking for. I've been looking for like knowing how to deal with this. And then I remember going back to the university like the Monday or something and just going like, okay, I got it. Like we know like I'm gonna study this club and this is gonna be urban planning. They were just like, what? I'm like, I need some money. We're gonna go. And so they did. They gave us I don't know, Shannon, if you got a grant, but we ended up getting grants and able to do that. And it was just like, it was amazing. I mean, the trust they put in us to take this seriously, which seemed pretty radical, was I always be grateful for that. I'll always be so grateful that they took this pretty crazy harebrained idea that we had and actually gave it, they gave it credibility by kind of supporting it. And we went over, like Shannon was talking about in Groningen, I wrote to him in advance and I was like, hey, I want to come over. I want to be part of this. I want to learn from it. The ex sent me, you know, like kind of trying to get in. And we just got lucky that they just let us in. They just let us be a part of it, gave us jobs. They just let us absorb it. And I just kind of was like learning all about it. Like, what does it mean? What does this membership thing mean? You know, what? And they had silkscreen studio, places for the musicians that were touring to stay. And it was very healthy, like a real professional place with like, that was clean and had laundry for musicians. And the members felt the ownership over it. And then they would talk about this history that was 100 years long. And then you talk to, and I'd meet people in the community and everybody had Vera stories. Everybody had, I mean, elected officials, business leaders, you know, moms and dads, and everybody, like Vera was part of so many people's experience in that town. And I just felt like it meant something, you know, because in the United States, especially in Seattle, an all ages venue would pop up and then go away as fast as it came. You know, you never had that longevity. You really struggle. I mean, the Firehouse is the exception to that. And the reason it's so notable is because it's the exception. And so we wanted to make something that lasted. We wanted to have this history and long legacy and do something that stuck around and not was just the whim of a little scene at the time. And yeah, so that's, we started really getting serious about it. And Shannon and I started thinking about it together, and we started kind of just writing it down on napkins and thinking about how this could work, and brought the idea back to the university when we got back for our senior year.
And I think like just the thing about like when James said, you know, Seattle needs Vera, what do you think? And I was sort of like, yeah, I feel like the thing for me that was so distinct, or like two things, were that it was a place that you could plug into. So I had gone to shows my whole life. And like that was the first place I could go, and like you could have something to do. You could be like an important part of making it happen, which felt really different from just kind of like coming and leaving. And that also because
not only that, but Shannon, I want to add to it. Not only could you do that, it was necessary
to do that. Yeah, you had to do that.
And these shows happened was because a community of people put them. I mean, it wasn't like, yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good point, but it was more like we need like people had to come and make this thing a reality every show.
But then like, since that is what happens at all DIY shows and venues and most all ages venues, I feel like what actually made it feel significant and different is that the community, including the government, including people in leadership, were behind it. So it was also like this feeling of validation of like you could be part of this thing, and it was a part of your community. It wasn't something that was happening in resistance to community or in resistance to something, but it was actually integrated in, and that felt like a distinct difference to me. And
we were experiencing that while we were experiencing the TDO in Seattle. So like our point of view was TDO world, you know, and all of a sudden we're in this place where they get it. They get it. They not only get it, they embrace it. They want it. They see this as valuable. They see this voice and this identity and all it can be as something to celebrate in the community. And it was just like, oh, yes, that's where I want to live. You know, like I want Seattle to be that. If I'm gonna live in like that seems right.
Yeah, it's always been a community space to me. I remember when I first stepped in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an art gallery. This is a music venue. I'm like, okay, but it's like ran by like kids my age. Like this is like not just one thing. It's not black and white. It's so many things, which is like the best part of it. And just hearing that story about like the actual first Vera in Holland is like, okay, it makes sense. Like it's like makes me want to go visit the OG Vera.
All Vera members should go to Vera Groningen at some point.
Right. And then so going into the next question, like one of the coolest things that I noticed just coming into the space at like 15 and volunteering and, you know, working with the steering person at shows and working with like the house managers and that kind of thing. And even just getting to know the staff over time is that it is, you know, such a democratic membership structure. It's always felt like non-hierarchical, youth-driven leadership. And so I guess like, how did that start and where did that like idea come from? Because aside from Vera, for me, like I've always noticed, like just in the music industry, people are always trying to like step on the heads of others. And it always like, you know, there's a boss and then there's like someone below them. And then there's like the people at the very bottom. And it's like, it's like a very common thing in the music industry. And so Vera is so polar opposite of that. And it's so amazing. So I guess like, where did that idea and like membership structure come from?
A lot of what we implemented at the Vera Project came directly from learning from Vera Groningen, for sure. I mean, the idea of member cards and membership and having committees that run different things and really incorporating the visual art with the music and having that all be part of the community and having, you know, like a booking group and just that accountability. That was something that I learned from Vera Groningen, for sure. And we totally ran with it. I mean, we were like, this is the model. It just felt like, it just felt good. It just felt like participation. It felt like, you know, when you see the union posters, they're like, together we can, you know, like it felt like that. And it was like, I mean, whatever structures you can put in place that enhance that, amplify that, or require that should happen. And so we borrowed some of their things from that. But it's really important to the story, and Shannon, I'll let you chime in on this too, that the other part of it that we really learned from is from the program that Shannon and I were in at the University of Washington, that Shannon told, Community Environment and Planning, CEP is what we called it. And that was a interdisciplinary program, and you know, there were no grades, kind of like the evergreen model in the University of Washington. And you really, the whole thing was really led by the program participants, the students, right? And so we developed our own curriculums, we had our own governance structures. You would decide things for the whole program, for the entire collective, and we had, you know, Fridays where we'd get together and govern each other. And I mean, it was just this, so many things came together from that. So many kind of these experiences in my life, or ideas or aspirations, or seeing something from afar. And at the university with CEP program, it all made sense. It all like the puzzle started to fit together for me. And that was so influential to what all of the Vera Groningen and CEP coming together with music. That's like from my perspective, and I'm curious to hear what Shannon thinks about this too. And Kate, you, like, that was when it all was like, okay, this is it. We got this. Those are the ingredients right there. And that's what we built, what my participation was, for sure.
Yeah, mine was more from working firsthand with young people on the East Side. And that's where, you know, originally when I went around talking to young people to say, what do you want to see happen in your community? They said, we just want to play shows. And so that became our motto. We just want to play shows. And we too had membership cards, and they said, we just want to play shows across the back. But I didn't know James and Shannon at that time. And so all these things were sort of happening simultaneously in different parts of the universe. So
I was just going to add that like the steering committee is a committee name from CEP. I think like that's where the idea came from for Vera, because it was the same in CEP. And that because of what you're talking about in the music industry of it being so hierarchical, like the fact that Kate Becker was an artistic director who was antithetical to that kind of structure made it possible, because at every moment Kate had so much experience being like, well, we need to have kids on a booking committee. We need to have da-da. And I still felt like I was kind of straddling like kid or not kid, even though whatever that means. And I wasn't as good at it as Kate was, is like doing those things just naturally. But I remember that I think I don't know, we probably got the question idea from you, Kate, or we all came up with it together, like to organize our first meetings. We just put up flyers that were like, what do you like? Do you want to have an all ages venue? I think or do you want to be part of a city supported all ages venue or something like that? It was just, that was the flyer that we put up all over town in order to get people to come to a meeting. And then sort of naively, I mean, when I think about trying to do something like that right now, I'm just like, I can't even fathom it. But the idea that it was just like whoever showed up was the right people, and then whoever was there we would just build with. So it's wrong. I just want to correct the history books that the first meeting was at the Richard Hugo House. It wasn't at Seattle Central. And James, were you there? I feel, for some reason, I feel like I was there by myself.
No, no. Well, I'll get to probably why you feel that way in a second, but go ahead.
Because I think there were 3 people there. I don't think any of them meant to come to the meeting. I think they just like came to the Hugo House for some other reason. Like there was a zine library. There was like cool stuff happening at the Hugo House. Oh, Hugo House. And we were just trying to get them involved. And like somebody had fairy wings on. And this was like before it was a normal thing that kids wore fairy wings. And it was like, it was just a totally different, I mean, it felt like a total flop. Like I had like this binder with like sign up sheets, and there was like nothing came out of that meeting. Then the next meeting was a Seattle Central meeting.
The reason that Shannon probably feels like she might have been there by herself at that and she wasn't is because so much of the values that went into this were from experience at the University of Washington and Vera Groningen. But when we wrote those things up, Shannon was the one who made sure we practiced them. I mean, there was no one stronger in making sure we lived up to these values than Shannon. I mean, I like if things got rough, I might compromise or one or two. And Shannon, like, no, like, it was always like, we have to respect this thing that we're trying to build, and you have to do it, and it was harder and it was messier, and you wanted maybe more people to show up at the meeting, but this is what you got, so you work with what you got, and you never ever, like, that was Shannon, like never letting us stop, always building from who's there at the time, and that's the growth in the tree ring that you're going to have for that moment, and there you build from it, and and it's unapologetic. That was like all Shannon. I mean, many people, but Shannon was the leader of that voice.
I agree.
I think I just had to answer to people. So that's why it was me, because I was like the membership touchstone. So I had to be the member leader. But I appreciate the fluffing of the ego. Thank you.
I think that even nowadays with our committee meetings, that's just how it is as well. Like whoever shows up, you're building from whoever came. If there's 2 people, there's 1 person, 3 people, or there's a whole room of people. It's just the exact same. And I think that's amazing that carried on throughout the years.
I think that's really, it's so healthy. It's so good. And I also love that from a music fan point of view. Like if you've ever gone to see a group or a musician that you really like, and there's just a handful of people there, it's not a great show, clearly for them. But you're there, right? You're there. You're like, and when the performer gives it to you as though the room was full because they respect that you showed up, that is like the best feeling in the world. And so I think we always just wanted to reflect that same spirit in some ways. And so that was great. I do want to tell a fun anecdotal story about the value of these things, though. It's one I've told a couple times, but I think it's worth repeating. And it's I was the executive director in charge of trying to fundraise and all that kind of stuff. And I was always trying to put together deals and try to get money to come in for sponsorship and stuff like that. And we had the strong membership kind of, egalitarian model of how decisions get made with the board and the staff and the members all kind of working together at all times. And Starbucks came to the Vera Project and they wanted to give us money. And it was like $5,000, not a lot of money, but to us, it was a lot of money. And we really needed the money. Like I was running out of ideas on how to get money and all this. I was feeling pretty desperate. And I was like, Shannon, I scored $5,000 from Starbucks. And I remember Shannon like, okay, let's run it by the membership and see what they say. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, we got $5,000. Like, we're not running it by anybody. Like, we need to run it by people like that. It's Starbucks, and like the members have to decide. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, okay, like rent's due. But so I remember calling up. It was Holly Hinton and a few others at Starbucks and going, hey, James here. I know that. Thank you so much for the gift. would you mind doing me a favor? And I know this seems kind of weird. And I was kind of being really apologetic for the whole process. And I was going, would you mind coming down to the Vera Project some evening and speaking to the membership committee about your gift and what that means? And they were like, James, we just wanted to give you money. I know, but would you mind doing it? It's kind of necessary part of our process. And I think they reluctantly came down, and they met, and we went in this room, and the table was full of young folks and members, and they just grilled them. I mean, grilled Starbucks. I mean, asking, so what do you want to do? You want to brand this? Like, it was just hard, direct questions, and just making sure that the money that was being given was given for the right reasons, and just investigating for ulterior motives, and just understanding the point of view of what the money represented and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting on the back, just kind of sweating it out. And then all of a sudden the meeting's over, and like, I think it was Ari, she was like, okay, well, we'll vote on it and get back to you tomorrow or something like that. And so I walked Starbucks out. And I'm like, to Holly, I'm so, like, I know that was hard. Thank you so much. This is just who we are, And they were almost in tears of just sheer appreciation for how much ownership and love that the young people had for their space. And we ended up getting like a $15,000 grant as a result of that conversation, of that process, of sticking to those democratic. I mean, it was just, I remember thinking, oh God, yeah, that's right. That's why I just remember feeling like, oh man, like it was great. It just shows the strength of that.
That was after we turned down the Capitol Hill block party because Lucky Strike was involved, though, and we had a stage outside of the block party in protest. Right. So that had been a huge controversy beforehand.
But Holly Hinton remains a fan of the Vera Project to this day. Super enthusiastic fan, and those values stuck, right? I didn't mention in my intro that when I came back to Seattle, shortly thereafter, James was transitioning to the city of Seattle. I stepped back in to lead Vera in that interim time and help find the new director, and then went on to lead the Vera Capital campaign to build out the space that the Vera Project is in now, and had a terrific committee of community members helping with that, but had to build it without any logos. There can be no branding. Go raise $1.8 million, but there can be no branding in the venue, right? That was a Vera value. So we did it. We got it done, right? And those values hold on to this day. And I could tell some other stories similar to the ones James told about when we brought Billy O'Neill to talk about Chihuly to the table at Vera. And I wanted to crawl under the table for part of that meeting.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Vera held to its values.
Yeah.
The thing that I think is so important about these stories and about this part of the conversation is how relevant democratic participation and representation and voice is in the world, and certainly in America. And that's what I loved so much about the Vera Project 20th anniversary video, is like the idea of that democratic participation and the voice and feeling ownership is as strong today as it was when we were starting, and the things that we put into place and we're trying to do our best to practice. It not only did it feel as strong, it felt stronger and better and more evolved. And it felt like that was probably the number one thing I was proud of when I watched that video. And it all stems from that value and that commitment to letting people be in control of their space when they're there, and change it in their representation for their participation. Like that's great.
Yeah.
We need more of that.
And I know Kate was mentioning before Vera moved into like a permanent space, obviously Vera was hosting shows at various places around Seattle. So I'm kind of going to segue these next couple of questions and combine them because I know we're running short on time. But what was it like throwing shows in the basement of the local 46 Union Hall? This is a place that I tried to look up, and it's like, it seems like I can't find anything from back then on it, but they have like their own thing going on now. But how did that come about? What was it like throwing shows at the Union Hall, and what were some of the craziest shows in those early days?
Well, I just want to say it wasn't the basement, Maya, but then I'll pass it on to my friends here to talk about the foundation of Local 46.
No, Kate, you got to talk about it. We did have one show in the basement. That's pretty much why we got kicked out. But
Oh, that's right.
yeah,
That's right.
one show in the basement. It was the best ever. I think it was the November group. And the half pipe was upstairs. But yeah, Kate, you should talk about the shows, because that was like the big.
Can I want to set Kate up a little bit on this, because when Shannon and I, were in Grown Again, we came back to Seattle. We were like, we need a Vera in Seattle and all that kind of stuff. We had no credibility. I mean, we'd done a little bit, but we didn't have the credibility to pull this thing off. And so we immediately knew we needed like some other help in here. And without you, I don't even think we had a conversation longer than a minute. Like Kate Becker, like if we can get Kate, everything is possible. And she just had this great connection with artists and just the right point of view on the whole thing. And we stalked Kate at a Seattle Arts Commission committee meeting where she was speaking, and told her our spiel, and kind of said if she didn't join us, that we would find incriminating photographs in some way and reveal them to the public. So we were just desperate to have her, because she brought so much. And that's the segue to the shows, because you and your relationship to the music community and being able to put on shows was just something that we could have never have done without you.
Well, I recall our first date at Hamburger Mary's on Capitol Hill following that Seattle Art Commission meeting. We got together at Hamburger Mary's, which no longer exists. I think there's a big cannabis store called The Reef where Hamburger Mary's used to be. But James, who was never afraid to ask for anything on behalf of the Vera Project, managed to land us a union hall at First and Broad. His uncle Dave was an electrician, and it was the IBEW Local 46 union. And he talked them into letting us use it on Saturday nights. I don't think they knew what they were in for, but they let us use it. So we would show up at this union hall that had literally hundreds of chairs set up in front of a stage. And we would show up around 1 or 2 in the afternoon and start breaking down those chairs and converting it into a showroom. And then we would have shows in there, and then we would have to set it back up. And we did that every Saturday night for a year. And we tried, because we were all of age by then, we tried to make it to last call at any bar throughout that year. And we made it one time. One time we got out in time to make it to a 1:30 last call, because it was an ordeal to set that room up and break it down. We had to move in all the sound equipment. We had some sound engineers who were committed to working with us, thank goodness. And then we were able to land really great bands. So some of the early shows at Local 46, we started with Murder City Devils, Botch, and the Blood Brothers. And we sold that show out. And that was our very first show on January 27th, 2001. But in that year, we had bands like...
Could I just interrupt on that show? Because there's a great irony in that show, in that as we were doing sound check for the show, we lost all the power to the electricians union hall. Like there wasn't enough power to... So I had to go, and I went to a couple like friends, contractors. Like I got all of the extension cords I could find, so that we could plug different amps in different parts of the stage and sound to different circuits within the entire building. So there were some upstairs and downstairs, so we wouldn't blow the fuses for the show.
And they were old fuses, so we couldn't flip a switch. We had to go buy fuses.
Right. Yes. So it was stressful and hectic, and somehow we managed to pull it off. But in that first year, we had not only Murder City Devils, the Blood Brothers, and Botch open our first show. We had the Gossip, we had the Shins, we had the Makers, who were big at the time and sort of ill-behaved. We had Mudhoney. We had just tremendous talent coming because the crowd was enthusiastic. These were $5 and $6 doors. These were very low doors, but the room was alive with people who wanted to see the music and were ready to go, right? So the bands were responsive and willing to come. And also they, I think they knew they were helping to build something that had potential to be more than that night's show.
Maya, if you want any more example of the thirst for music and all ages kind of scene music, look no further than the crappy Union Hall, Local 46, being like possible to sell out and like good bands wanting to play there. That's how bad the city was and the scene was, because this room sucked. I mean, this room, it sounded bad, it looked bad, it was bad by almost every measurement.
Oh, yeah. I know. When I was in the hardcore band that I was in, we played so many different like Legion halls and Union halls, and we would have to do the chairs thing at the end of the night too. So I know what you mean.
It was so
Wow.
we were starved. I mean, this was good. I mean, this was like, I mean, it felt great even though it was so bad.
Yeah.
Shannon, I think if we didn't tell the story about the membership concerts and that we would be missing a big part of it, of the system.
For sure. I think that, I mean, Maya, did you ever play a member show?
What is that? It sounds like Veracity. It sounds like modern day Veracity.
Maybe Veracity changed into that. Veracity used to be an open mic night where Joshua Powell would serve free food. That's how it started.
Okay, that's how Veracity started. Yeah.
And then maybe it morphed into this other thing, which is our member showcases. So anybody who was in a band or a musician could sign up to play a member show. So once a quarter, I think, or once a month, once a quarter.
Once a quarter.
We had a membership showcase, and
they were named by Nick Turner, and they were called Night of the Living Vera.
Oh, right. Night of the Living Vera. Was it the Night of the Living Vera? Yeah, that was the one that was the downstairs, upstairs at Local 46.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And for whatever, God knows what reason, we were like, we can have a half pipe in this Union Hall since the room is like so big and the electricians never come there.
We had put on so many shows, they never showed up.
Never, but we set the fire alarm off accidentally because I think the November group, of all things, our own member group, like had a fog machine, and the fog machine set off the fire alarm. So then the like president of the Union Hall had to come down and meet the fire chief.
Well, first of all, the fire department showed up, couldn't turn off the alarm because the door
going on,
rammed the door down, and I'm just like, oh, we are dead.
Yeah, break the glass.
Was that the last straw? Was that the last show?
Yeah, they'd only given us permission to have shows in the main room, right? We had like the basement turned into a showroom. I think maybe some stuff outside in the parking lot. The main room, we put up a quarter pipe or a half pipe or something like that. We had like 2 shows going in there, 2 stages in that room. We had so much stuff that we really never asked for permission for. And then the fire department showed up, and then the union folks came. I remember that they were so interested in us. Oh God.
Mad. Yeah, they were mad. But that was the member showcase. And now is it that Veracity is a member showcase?
Yeah, I remember when Veracity first started up, again, the booking committee doing shows, it was very similar. Like we were bringing food and it was donation based. So someone like a member would cook food or, get food catered or donated. And then we would basically, you can buy it at the show by donation. And then they would pick a nonprofit or some sort of like collective that they would want to give that money to. And then obviously all the artists that night would be Vera volunteers or members. So yeah, it sounds very similar.
Cool. Yeah, this was, was Veracity on the stage or was it like out in the lobby?
It was in the gallery.
In the gallery, yeah, okay. Because we had it in the gallery, Veracity was in the gallery, but then the member showcase was kind of like you get to be on the big stage with the sound check and the lights and the whole thing. But it just makes me think as we're talking about this, that there's like so many different aspects of Vera history and the Vera experience, and like how many people could just tell you a completely different version of everything we've said. And that includes
Right.
Josh Powell and Melissa Quayle and like all the folks that were also simultaneously running the venue. Like they all had their own stories and like legends and mythologies that were happening in and amongst their group, like the groups that they were a part of that inside of Vera. So just to say that it's like impossible to cover what was happening. I think.
Can I just add to that a little bit? That we did the local 46 for a year, and then we went down to the International District Chinatown and did shows at the theater off Jackson for about, I don't know what,
Velvet Elvis.
yeah, it was just like that. It was very black box. It was actually a beautiful space. It was very intimate. I think, did we do a K record showcase there?
We did a lot of K record stuff there in general.
Yeah, I agree. We were there for a year, you guys. We were
a year?
Space for
year and
almost a full year. A year and 2 months, did you say?
Yeah. And being in the International District was super fun. I mean, it was just exciting to be down there, and the space was beautiful, and it just changed. We went from this Grand Canyon space to this tiny black box theater that sounded really good. It just changed everything, but we couldn't stay there because it wasn't ours and they were using it for other things, and it was getting difficult to program, even though we loved the people and they were very good to us. In fact, they were so good to us that there was a woman there who told us about when they were in the Annex Theater, that space that was going to be developed in 4th Virginia was no longer going to be developed. The money had fallen through in the project or something like that, and it was available again. And I mean, I think we all just were like, oh my God, we have to go see it. And so we got the number for the landowners, whatever. They walked us through it, and we told them what we wanted to do. And they kind of really quickly said, okay, if you want it, yours, but hey, just so you know, it's it's going to be $2,000 a month, or it was, and you're gonna have to get this place back up. There was almost no. It was all right, fine, you can have it, you kids, or whatever. And 4th in Virginia and Seattle, the number, probably the most valuable real estate in the whole city right now. We could afford that. And the important part of the story, though, for me is that it needed a lot of work. The Annex Theater had demolished the place. They literally had a thrasher party because the building was going to be torn down, and they were bringing closure to their space. So they beat it up, and so we inherited that. And there were rats and all this. It needed a lot of work. We had somebody come in, electricians and builders, and they're like, okay, for about 25,000 grand, you could get this thing back up and running and have it be permitted and legit and all this kind of stuff. And we're like, oh man, how do we raise that kind of money? And we were at the Showbox one night, and we went to Josh Ayala, who was working at Sub Pop at the time, and he was on our board at the Vera Project, a founding board member, a founding leader of everything we did. And we were so excited about Josh, the annex space is available. We could take it. They'll give it to us, but we need some money and we have to figure this out. I think he was board president, so we were kind of talking about strategy or whatever. And then the night went on, and he went over, and it was we were at the Showbox for a Sub Pop record showcase of some kind, or there was a Sub Pop band playing there. So all these Sub Pop people were there. And he went over to Jonathan Poneman, the owner of Sub Pop, and said the story, and said that we needed $25,000 to get the place up and running. And Jonathan Poneman that night said, I will make you a deal. I will give Vera Project half of the money as a gift, half of it as a loan, pay me back when you can, get started. And Josh came back to us and told us that. And I just remember just going, oh my God, we're doing this. This is happening. We're going to get our own space. We're no longer just traveling around town working, with whatever we could find. It was going to be ours, our clubhouse, Vera's first real home that was ours, and that we could be making it in our own way. And that changed everything. And the great part of that story is it was about a year or two later, Shannon, that we actually got a pretty nice grant from a foundation, and we had a little bit of money in the bank, just enough to pay back Sub Pop, and we wrote them a check for $12,500. And a week or so goes by, never got cashed or whatever, and then another week goes by, we get an envelope in the mail to us from Sub Pop, and it was our check ripped up.
And you didn't want to accept the money. That's amazing.
Amazing, right?
That's amazing. Well, hearing everything today, I feel like I had heard little bits and pieces of these stories, but hearing them all in pretty great detail is just it literally all makes make sense for me of my experience of Vera for the last 7 years, and it just makes it feel just so much more amazing than it already does. But I know this was all such a learning experience for you guys as young people in the DIY scene, but like it's just grown into this huge, amazing, just like thing that I guess, did you ever imagine that it was going to get this big? And I guess what were your goals back then, and where did you want it to be in 20 years? Like, did you imagine it was going to be like this?
No. No.
It's pretty even 7 years ago, I never thought it would be how it is now.
We were so fragile, so show to show, so scraping to figure out how to fund this thing and keep it going, that it was hard to keep a vision for the very long term when you're trying to figure out how to keep things afloat in the day to day. We all were determined. We knew that we had the tenacity to push forward, but we were going to need community to step up and partner with us for it to have any sort of longevity. That was my feeling. And they did. Over and over and over again, communities stepped up to support the Vera Project. So.
Shannon, do you want to go or do you want me to go? What do you think? Go.
I'll try to be really quick. I feel like Vera Groningen was around for 100 years. And so there was this idea that we could just be like, we want it to be around for 100 years. And what I remember, like, something, at least that this was my perspective on it, that became really important, that's why it's kind of ironic to do this, is that like the organization, in order to survive, needed to be like really made up of a lot of different people and not attached to founders, because what we watched in arts organizations in Seattle is that like they really died if they were led by a cult of personality and that person left. But also, like, in retrospect, going and studying all these different DIY organizations and kind of seeing like how they last or they don't last. And there's something about like, if there's a structure, the stability of the city and that kind of support, that relationship and that community support, but then there's like a fluidity in the people that are coming in and out, like create, like in my idealized brain, I'm like that is maybe like the ideal structure that can last a long time. Yeah, that's sort of, but it did really feel touch and go. And it was like, sure, we say this thing about 100 years, but I'm watching all of these great organizations all over the country close all the time. So who knows what's going to happen. So thank you, Maya and Ricky and Jason.
You know, the thing that strikes me is kind of what I was saying earlier about the democratic process and participation, and what Shannon was saying about having a lot of people having a piece of this. The thing that one of my 20 years later, the way I feel about it is that when you're doing that work, when you're doing democratic participation and all that, it is harder. It is absolutely harder than just making executive decisions. It's so much more messier to have to go through all of that process and have all of the voices and have all of anyone's particular point of view have the equal, weight as anyone else's. And it's frustrating. I'm straight up, it's hard, it's frustrating. You just want to go, you need to go, whatever. But the benefit of it is that something lasts 20 years. The benefit of it is three of the founders can walk away from an organization, and not only does it still stand, it's stronger. Like that's the reward. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it's messier. Yes, it's more difficult. Yes, there's so many things that are frustrating about it for everybody involved, participant or observer. But it's so the rewards and the benefits are so long term. And I think that's what the 20th anniversary video shows. And I think that's what we need more of. Like we need, like that's the metaphor for America right now. Like that's for that, and I mean that in all sincerity. I'm not trying to be, hyperbolic or anything. Like this is truly, we need this. We need for everyone's voice to be there and to be strong. And yes, it's harder, and yes, it's messier, and yes, it's frustrating, and yes, and all of these things, but it's worth it. Like, we're not saying it's going to be easy. We're saying it's going to be fucking worth it. This is, and doing that in music is so great. And the fact that it still happens in Seattle at a time when we need that voice is awesome. And I hope it's there in its new reflection another 20 years from now, and up, like Shannon said, 80 years from now.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today and having this conversation. I've learned so much, and it's just reinforced my love and passion for the organization 100%. And I'm just so grateful as well to you guys for sharing your story and obviously founding it. So thank you so much for talking to me about this. I'm really excited to have more conversations along the way.